I don't know, maybe I'm retarded or something, but I mean, we have our own masters.
Los Angeles, 1981. Mick Mars becomes the guitarist whose signature sound built the Mötley Crüe empire. Cut to 2022. He steps back from touring. 2023, he slaps his own band with a lawsuit. And in that single moment, the main illusion they peddled for decades shatters to pieces. The Brotherhood. Because this fight isn't about failing health. It sure as hell isn't about friendship. It's about money, rights, iron-fisted control. It's about who stays in the fold and who gets tossed to the curb as dead weight, stripped of their voice entirely. When Mick Mars stepped into Mötley Crüe's early LA lineup in 1981, he didn't look like the kind of guy the rock industry crowns as the face of a new era. He was older, harder around the edges. He moved heavy, already living with a disease that would only lock up his body more as the years dragged on. In a scene selling youth, chaos, and raw sex appeal, he was the ultimate outsider. But that outsider? He was the one piece they couldn't replace. Mötley Crüe was built to look like a dangerous family taking on the world. Nikki Sixx, Vince Neil, Tommy Lee, and Mick Mars quickly morphed into a single brand: noise, provocation, sleaze, and success. To the public, it was sold as a blood brotherhood. Us against them. Like this machine didn't have a single weak spot. But even back then, the scales were tipped. Mick wasn't the guy you slapped on a poster as the symbol of the decade. He wasn't the most marketable face. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room. He was the guy doing the heavy lifting. He built the sound. Without it, the whole bad boy image just falls flat. And that's exactly why his story came with a brutal price tag right out of the gate. The bigger they got, the more Mötley Crüe turned into a corporate brand peddled through faces, tabloid scandals, and the myth of the Brotherhood. Tour after tour, record after record. The cash and the status skyrocketed, but so did the divide. A massive gap between what the fans saw on the outside and what actually held the damn thing together on the inside. Flash sold better than foundation. Chaos sold better than discipline. The pretty picture was a hell of a lot easier to market than the guy carrying the sheer weight of their sound. It was a cruel paradox from day one. The more crucial his playing became, the harder they tried to push him to the back of the legend. They couldn't survive without his guitar. But the machine was already learning to operate like the heart of the band. Wasn't the guy supplying the grit, it was whoever was easiest to stamp a logo on. Mick Mars forged the tone that made them legends, and that sound was the one thing they couldn't strip away from him. At least, not until they figured out a way to push the man himself out the door. The sickness didn't take him down. The disease just handed them a convenient alibi. The real kill shot came from somewhere else, from the paperwork dictating who's still in the band and whose history. The contract became the ultimate weapon. It dictated who had the right to take the stage as Mötley Crüe and who gets left behind, even if they built the damn thing from the ground up. As long as the machine ran smooth, nobody looked at the fine print. But the second the tour, the money, and the obligations kicked in, the whole structure shifted. First, they limited his stage time. Then came the wording claiming he couldn't pull his weight on the road anymore. Then a downgrade in status. No longer an equal partner. Just a touring musician. A hired gun who plays the notes but calls zero shots. And this is where the real motive bleeds through. Because this was never about his health. It was about control, his cut, his voting power. It was about who stays inside the legal fortress called Mötley Crüe, and who gets turned into a replaceable spare part. From this point on, the storyline split. One side claims he walked away. The other points to his status being gutted and his rights stripped. The fight isn't personal anymore. It's strictly legal. This is where you see the sheer scale of the betrayal. They didn't just push him to the sidelines. They downgraded him. They turned the guy who poured the concrete for the band into a temp. A guy they could rent, replace, and cut out entirely without putting a single dent in the machine. That's the exact moment the Brotherhood gets swallowed by corporate mechanics. Because if you can reclassify a founding member on a piece of paper, it means you can rewrite his place in history too. The lawsuit is the point of no return. This isn't a locker room argument anymore. It's a cold, hard admission that an equal partnership is dead and gone. And that leaves us with one hell of a question, the one that shatters the whole legacy. If they could just erase his role with a pen, what else about this band was a lie from day one? We need to hear where you stand. It's what fuels us to keep digging up these stories. Sound off in the comments. What's the real bottom line for you here? The money? The replacement of Mick Mars? Or the exact moment the Brotherhood died? Let's keep moving, because next, we have to figure out exactly how this war reached the absolute point of no return. From there, the fallout only escalated. First, they hit his wallet. When the band hit the massive stadium circuit, the argument quickly boiled down to payouts and Mick Mars's cut. That's exactly where his new spot in the pecking order became crystal clear. A guy who had bled for Mötley Crüe for decades suddenly found himself in a position where his worth was being recalculated, capped, and haggled over like a mere variable. For him, the message was loud and clear. Inside that room, he was no longer an equal. He was just an expendable part of the machine. Next, they went after his status. The public PR spin about his absence started working against him. The whole conversation revolved around his health, his physical condition, and his ability to play. To the fans, it looked like a logical progression of events. But to Mick Mars, it meant something else entirely. They were scripting a convenient narrative in advance. One where swapping him out looked perfectly natural, and cutting him loose looked completely justified. And in that moment, it wasn't just the present that was shifting. It was the perception of his entire legacy. They were sidelining his contribution, pushing his role out of the spotlight. He wasn't just being forced off the stage anymore, he was being erased from the Mötley Crüe myth altogether. Then, the war got personal, and it went public. Statements leaked to the press. The responses got brutal. The accusations were no longer an in-house problem. Everything built on that old Brotherhood illusion started crumbling in broad daylight. For the audience, this wasn't just a squabble between bandmates anymore. It was watching a decades-old legacy burn to the ground in real time. This was the most painful hit of all. Mick Mars wasn't just defending his money or his rank anymore. He had to defend his name, his rightful place in history, the absolute fact of who he was to that band for all those damn years. The endgame was predictable. The 2023 lawsuit just put ink to what had already happened. By that point, inside Mötley Crüe, there was zero chance of turning back. The Brotherhood had died a long time ago. The courtroom just made the divorce official. Mick Mars's story doesn't end in the courtroom. He refused to play the part they scripted for him. He wasn't about to fade out quietly as some former member you can swap out without a ripple. Instead, he dragged the whole damn mess into the daylight and exposed exactly how this machine operates. And honestly, that's his ultimate victory. Because this exposes a playbook that's a hell of a lot bigger than just one band. First, you peddle the Brotherhood, the myth of the guys who walked through hell together. That's the hook that sells the records, the stadium tours, the high-priced nostalgia. But behind closed doors, a completely different set of rules kicks in. Cold, hard cash, percentages, ironclad control. And somewhere along the line, it stops mattering who bled for the band on day one. All that matters is who fits the current corporate blueprint. This isn't a one-off, it's standard operating procedure. It's why these brutal fallouts never really go away, they just change their skin. Today it's a rock band, tomorrow it's another project, another brand, running on the exact same cutthroat principles. And that leaves us staring down a question that goes way beyond just one band. If even the Mötley Crüe Brotherhood turned out to be just another piece of the marketing strategy, if the guy who literally built the foundation can be shoved aside and his role completely repackaged, then where exactly do you draw the line between the cold hard truth and the lie they're selling you?